Hello everybody, welcome back. In this video, we shall continue our journey into the world of Scratch. The video is called Sprite Wants to Dance. So today we will learn about costumes, we will learn more about backdrops, we will see how we can add music and put all of this together to create a very simple dance studio. In doing so, we will also revise the concepts of movement. In fact, we will be combining concepts of movement, that is motion, with change of costume to create dance moves. So the concepts we are learning today will actually be applied as we make more advanced games later on. So let's get started. Let's go to our familiar uh, Scratch window. And let's first see what are costumes, right? So for this purpose, I'm going to remove my cat sprite, but instead add another sprite called the princess. Uh, why did I choose princess? The reason will become clear as we go on. But for now, let me just find princess sprite. Yeah, it's there. So this princess sprite, once you select the princess sprite or actually any other sprite, you can click on the top left here in this area called costumes, right? So if you click this, you see that princess has several different looks, right? So several different uh, ways that the princess can appear, and these are called its costumes. So for example, princess A, then princess B, her hands are folded, princess C, princess D, her hand is on her waist, and so on, right? So the way I explain this to my students is that costumes are just like our different looks, right? So we get different looks perhaps by putting on a new makeup, uh, perhaps by changing our hairstyle, perhaps by dressing differently. Maybe when we go to a party, we wear a party dress. When we go to a school, we wear a school uniform. So those are all our costumes. In the same way, sprites can have multiple looks, and these are called costumes, right? Like we saw in case of the princess, we have five different costumes, and these can be used as we will see later on, right? Now, before going further, I want to show you a very quick way of finding the different costumes for any sprite, right? So what we do is just go back to code, right? Go to select a costume. So choose a sprite, right? So when you choose a sprite, as we have done in the past, as you know, you get a you know a lot of sprites which you could choose. Now all you have to do is to hover your mouse on top of any sprite. For instance, right now I'm looking at Anina dance, and that has several costumes which show one by one, and it looks like Anina is actually dancing, right? Let's look at one more example. Let's say we take ballerina, right? So ballerina also has some costumes, and you can see that those costumes are displayed one after the other. Uh, let's see our princess, right? So princess is here, right? Princess, as we saw those costumes, we can again see them here by just hovering our mouse on top of the princess, right? So that's just a quick way of seeing what all costumes a given sprite has, right? Now costume is always associated with a sprite because costume gives a new look to a sprite, right? All right, so let's go back to a princess costume. So again, I came back here and I'm going to say let's go back to this costumes. Yeah, now let's see, we have princess has five costumes: A, B, C, D, E, right? Let's say I want to uh, let's say I think that this dress does not look very nice to me. I want to change its color, right? So I want to change the way the costume of the princess is. I want to change its color. Yes, I am very much allowed to do so. And how do I do that? I just say, for instance, I want to take this costume called Princess Costume A, Princess A. I select fill and I just go and click here and see. and immediately you see the look of princess changes, right? Now, when you pull out a new sprite from the repository, from the library of sprites, the costume that the sprite takes is always the first costume, right? Later on, we will see how we can make it take the other costumes, but it's the first costume that it takes. And as I showed you, you can change. Now, you can change this even further. For example, you may want to say, okay, the top should be probably a little different color, and I can go and change the top, right? So now princess looks different, right? It's simple as that. Uh, so, you can modify these costumes. You can even, add a new costume to a princess, right? So how can I do that? So just like we were adding sprites, you notice when I go to costumes here, there is a icon here which looks similar to adding a sprite. Just say choose a costume, right? I say choose a costume, and I get all the costumes for all the different sprites that are available, right? So for example, let's say for princess, I want to maybe give it a look of Abby, right? So I can add this costume, and all that happens is this costume becomes one of the princess looks, right? So like I said, these are different looks the princess will take. When you first pull out a sprite from the library, it always takes the first costume here, right? But later on, we will see that we can also, you know, uh, make these costumes change as the program goes on, right? Now, uh, you might wonder that, let's say I want to make my own costume, right? I want to draw my own costume. Is that possible? Uh, I guess you guessed it. The answer is yes. And that's basically similar to what we were doing with the sprites themselves or with the backgrounds, right? So similar interface, just go and click on this cat, right? If you say, let's say, choose paint, right? So if I choose paint, then I can draw whatever costume I want, right? So for example, I can say I want a lion, and so the princess, uh, of course, it does not look like a princess, but I can draw. My point here is I can draw a costume for the given sprite, right? Now remember, this is not the sprite. This is just one of the looks for the sprite, right? So sprite can take so many looks, just like when we, like I said, when we go to school, we have a certain look. When we go to a party, we have some other look. So your sprites can also have those. And uh, you can, by some sprites already have many different looks. If not, then you can add a new look like we did with Abby, or you can even make a new look, right? You can, in fact, upload a picture from your computer. That also works, right? But again, for the new users, it's okay to stick with whatever looks are available from scratch, right? So I'm also going to remove this Abby D, right? Now you may wonder, why do I need all these costumes, right? So let us go to, now that we know that princess has 5 costumes, let us do a little bit of code for the princess, right? To see what we can do with these costumes, right? So far we know the princess has 5 different looks. Now we will see what is it that we can do by the fact that princess has all these different looks, right? So I go to the princess code, right? So I select princess here in the home, and as you can see, there's a small princess here. So now I'm going to add code to control the looks of princess, right? Control which costume the princess will show, right? So remember, princess has 5 different costumes here, out of which one of the costumes you have modified, right? So if I select this, it comes here, right? But let's see something more interesting, yeah? So as you know, I always start my code with when flag clicked, all right? When flag clicked, right? Now there's a block in looks which says which costume I choose, right? So there are 2 ways of doing this. One is switch costume, one is next costume, right? So what does this mean? Let's start with switch costume, right? So if I say switch costume, maybe I can say when flag clicked, switch costume to princess. I can drop this down and I get all the options that are there for the princess sprite, right? So princess sprite, as you know, had 5 different costumes. So I get a choice of these five costumes to choose from, right? So princess A, B, C, D, or E. So let's say I say when flag is clicked, princess should switch to costume princess A. Yeah. Now I wanted to wait for maybe 1 second, right? Wait for 1 second, and then I can duplicate this part of the code and keep adding it here, right? So I say duplicate, right? And maybe duplicate again and duplicate again, right? So let's say I did this. Now, for this to make sense, first I switch to princess A. I wait for 1 second, switch to say princess B. Now you could also choose switch to princess C. That's what you want to do. But I'm saying go from A to B to C to D and to say E, right? Now, when I do this and when I run this code, right, what will happen is that princess will start with princess A, wait for a second, then go to princess B, wait for a second, go to princess C, and so on. Let's just quickly see this. So when flag clicked, basically when I go and click this flag, right, let's see what happens, right? So princess takes A, right? Now you saw that how princess changed its costume every 1 second, right? Now let's say I wrap this up in a forever, right? So I say forever keep doing this, right? So forever keep doing this, and then what happens? So it looks like princess starts to kind of like a dance, right? So it's always switching costume, it's changing its hand, it's changing position, and it looks like it's dancing, right? Now, what we did was basically use switch costume to the different costumes, right? Now, a more concise way of doing this, a more shorter way of doing the same thing would be to use next costume, right? So what I can say is in the beginning, maybe I'll move this code away, right? Maybe I don't need all of this. I'll move this away. In the beginning, when flag click, go to princess A, which means switch costume to princess A. Always start with princess A. However, wait for 1 second and go to the next costume. So what will this do? This code will also achieve whatever we were doing earlier, because forever, every 1 second, princess will choose the next costume. So which means if it was princess A, the costume will become princess B, then princess C, then princess D, princess E, and once it comes back to princess E, it will come back to princess A, right? So if I see this code, for example, you see an exact same thing will happen, right? So the princess is going through all these costumes, it's changing its costume, and it looks like the princess is kind of like dancing, right? So let's just recap what we did briefly. As I told you, costumes are like different looks for the sprite, just like we take different looks when we go to different places. So can sprites. And once, so the princess has, let's say, for example, five costumes, I'm sorry. Every sprite can be given different number of costumes, and we can use switch costume and next costume to control which which costume we want to be seen. Right now you might wonder, should I use switch or should I use next, right? It's very simple. When you want to fix which costume the sprite should take, right, when you want to fix, basically, for example, in this case, when flag clicks, I want it to become a princess A, right? In that case, I go and use switch costume. When I just wanted to change, right? Basically, I wanted to go pick up a next costume, right? Pick up the costume that lies after this, I can use next, right? So next does not need you to tell which costume you are presently in. It will take care of itself, right? But here I wanted princess to take costume A, a princess A costume, and hence I started with this princess. Right now my princess is looking rather large, so I'll make it a little bit smaller. Maybe I'll make it say 50% of what it is, right? And it becomes small, and maybe I can place my princess here, right? Let's continue. Let us now add a sprite, which so let's say I add another sprite. As you know, I told you, when I click on these sprites, I should be able to see all the costumes that they have, right? So I'm going to pick a sprite which is called Aemon. And as you notice, when I clicking Aemon, when I'm hovering my mouse on top of Aemon, there are no other sprites that Aemon has, right? So I will use this to show you how I can use Aemon's existing sprite, existing costume to create a new costume for Aemon, right? So what did I do? I brought Aemon here. Aemon is also looking a little bit big, so I'll resize it to maybe 50%, right? Now Aemon, maybe 50 is too small, say 70%, right? So Aemon looks 70%. Now I go to costumes, right? And as we had predicted, Aemon has only one costume, which is which is basically this, right? Now what we want to do is we want to give Aemon another costume which kind of looks similar to whatever Aemon is looking right now, right? And to do so, I will first I will basically copy this I'll go and right click on this and I'll get a duplicate, right? So now Aemon has two costumes, but you notice that both costumes are exactly same as each other, right? Because we just duplicated, right? I will convert this to vector, right? And by doing this, I will select this and so I'm selecting the second costume, by the way, right? So Aemon is Aemon, whatever it was. I choose Aemon 2. I selected this and now I can go and, for example, flip Aemon, right? So notice Aemon, although it did not have a costume earlier, but by me duplicating and flipping it, now Aemon has two costumes, which is Aemon and Aemon 2, right? And what that also means is that I can make Aemon also look like it is dancing by simply using next costume. Let's see how we can do that, right? So I go to Aemon. So I've created these costumes. Let me go to the code, right? And now notice I am on the Aemon code, right? So the princess will not be disturbed by this. Aemon will do what Aemon is being told to do, right? So I'll go here and I say events when flag clicked, right? Let's say I say forever. Let's say I say forever. Yeah, where is forever? So forever, right? Aemon, please go. I go to the looks and I say take next costume and then I just add a small amount of weight, right? So let's say I add a little bit of weight, maybe say 0.3 seconds, right? Now let's see, let's just look at this code first, right? See where we are and what's going to happen, right? So when flag click forever, pick the next costume, right? Wait for 3.3 seconds and then keep doing this forever, right? So what this will basically do is Aemon will switch between its two costumes every zero point 0.3 seconds. It will change its look every zero point 0.3 seconds and see what happens, how amazing it looks, right? Remember, by the way, we have not changed the code for the princess, right? So princess will also do whatever we are telling princess to do, and Aemon will also do whatever we are telling Aemon to do, right? So if I did this, so you notice Princess is doing its thing, and Aemon is doing also kind of a dance, an impossibly difficult dance, but it is doing that. It never gets tired. It will keep on doing this, right? So notice now Princess is doing its dance, Aemon is doing his dance, and so on, right? Now, for those of you who may be wondering what happened if I inverted these two, right? Actually, it's the same thing. I'll do this as well because here I put for the princess, I have put weight first and then next costume. The reason was because I wanted this costume to show for 1 second. If I didn't do that, then costume will switch earlier, but we can be consistent, right? So I'll be consistent here, and if I did this, so you notice now princess is doing her dance and Aemon is doing his dance, right? And the amazing part is that with in case of Aemon, we did not have costumes to start with, but we created a new costume and we gave Aemon the capability to appear like it is dancing. A very simple dance, but think about it, it's quite a difficult dance, right? Now, let's move forward and we will see now how we can use guide the motion blocks, right? How we can use the motion blocks to create another kind of dance effect, right? And for this purpose, I'm going to call on the sprite called ballerina, right? So this ballerina, you can see it has got four costumes, right? So I'm going to take this ballerina. It's a very nice dancing figure, right? So maybe I can place her somewhere here. Princess can be here, perhaps, right? Maybe Princess is here. Aemon can be moved a little bit here. Maybe I'll put Ballerina somewhere here, right? Now, I shall put a little bit of code to see how we can get Ballerina to dance, right? And it's actually not hard, right? So again, I've gone to the Ballerina sprite this time. I'm saying events when flag clicked, right? So which means when this flag is clicked, Princess has been hearing it, Aemon has been listening to it, and now we will see Ballerina will also do what we are telling it to do, right? So we will tell Ballerina, look, Ballerina, when the flag is clicked, I use the motion block. I say, go to, say, some position, right? Now, I want Ballerina to appear somewhere in the lower part of this thing. So you remember, in terms of, the X and Y values, this point is about 0, 0, right? Right now, Ballerina is at minus 83, minus 58. Do not get put out by the negative numbers. It only means you are to the left of the center and you are down, right, from the center, right? So let's say I say, Ballerina, you should go to maybe say X equals to minus 190, and the height maybe I can make minus 60, right? So let's just quickly run this code. What it will do is it will send Ballerina here, right? Aemon and Princess started dancing because we told them to do so. Ballerina was told only to go to minus 190, minus 60, and hence it has come here, right? Now we will add some code for Ballerina to dance, right? And I will use the glide block for this, right? Remember, we use glide for making a square. I'll use the same glide block to make my Ballerina dance, right? And what should I do? I say glide 1 second to, right? Say I say glide 1 second to maybe minus 190. So I do not want it to, I don't want it to go up. So I will not change the Y value. Remember, Y value tells you how far up in the ladder you are. In this case, I do not want Ballerina to go up. So I will not change her Y value here, but I want it to go in the left to right. So I will make X, let's say I will make it minus, let's say minus 130, right? So it will take 1 second to glide there, right? And then I can say, I can go to looks and I say, looks, choose the next costume, right? Uh, so with this, I can duplicate this a few times and see what will happen, right? It's very interesting. So if I duplicate this, right? Uh, I know Ballerina has 4 costumes, so I can do this, say 4 times, right? So I can even do it more. It will just go from 4 costumes to more, but 4 is fine. Maybe I can put, so it was starting at minus 190, minus 190, minus 160. I went to minus 130. Probably I can make this, say 30. Doesn't matter. You do what you like, right? I make this 100 and I make this, let's say 140 or something, right? Maybe I can make it 130, right? Now let's see what this does, right? So basically when I click flag, you notice that Ballerina is appearing to dance as well, right? And why is that? Because I'm there are two things that Ballerina is doing, right? Gliding, it is gliding, and it is also changing costume, right? You notice that it looks like it's gliding very fast for some time, and that's just because the values here are somewhat not equal, right? So if I make them say minus 190 to minus 130 to say minus 70 and then minus 10. So essentially, I'm incrementing each value by 60 points. So I can go to say 50. Ballerina will look like it's dancing a lot better, right? So if I do this, now Ballerina comes this, does some jump, does some change, and comes back, right? Now, again, in a dance kind of scenario, it's good to just wrap this in a forever, right? And if I do so, what happens is, interesting. You should take a look. Uh, See this carefully, right? If I did this, what will happen, right? Comes here and Ballerina starts coming back here, right? So basically, Ballerina is doing dance again and again. Now, you may wonder, why did I use, why did I do this, right? Uh, why did I put the go inside the forever? There's no specific reason. I just wanted to show you that in this code, Ballerina is slowly gliding till this point and then suddenly jumping back, right? Maybe that is not looking very good. But the point here is that it's gliding, changing costume, gliding, changing costume, and hence it looks like it is dancing, right? Now let's say on the other hand, I had put go to outside this, right? The entire code will look different, right? So the same thing, what will happen now is that after reaching this point, it will take 1 second to glide back to this the first point, right? So it will reach till 50 minus 160, then it will forever come back here. It'll glide 1 second to this point, and that's what you're seeing now, right? So how you write your code will influence what these sprites do, right? But you are seeing clearly that I am making my ballerina do a dance forever and ever again by just using the glide block and by using next costume. Since I knew that ballerina has all these costumes, so I said, okay, I could use this, to make it dance, right? Now let's take one more example, right? So let's add one more sprite to this, and that sprite that I'm going to add is called Avery walking, right? So now here Avery is also looking rather large, so I'll make Avery also say about 50% of her size, right? So if I did that, right? So if I did 50%, maybe 50 small, say 70% of her size, right? So if I made Avery say around this much, now you see what I want to do is maybe I'll place Eamon here, Ballerina here, and I can place them in some way, right? Now, for Avery, right, what are the sprites, what are the costumes that Avery has? How can I find out? I can click Avery, I can click costumes, and then I know that Avery has got a style of walking. If you see this fast, it look like Avery is walking, right? Now, we will see how we will use this fact that it's walking to create a kind of dance effect, right? So how do I do that? Once again, I go to the Avery code, right? Remember, this is called Avery walking. So I go to the Avery walking code and I say events when flag clicked, right? So always I start my code with when flag clicked. Let's say I tell Avery to go to wherever she is right now. So she is right now at 70, 80. That looks good to me. So I say motion, say go to 71. Maybe I'll call it 70, 70 minus 80, right? That's just telling it to go wherever it is right now. And then I say, let's say I use either I can use switch costume or I can use next costume, right? So I can say, let's say I say switch, maybe I can say in the beginning, switch costume to every walking A always, right? Every walking A. Go to this point, right? Then I use this block called move, say 20 steps, right? Move 20 steps. And maybe I'll say wait for a little while, control, maybe wait for just say, let's say 0.2 seconds or 3 seconds, maybe 0.3 seconds, or maybe a little bit longer, say, let's say 0.5 seconds, right? And then I say use next costume, right? So uh, I say use, basically go to looks, and so I can tell it switch costume to perhaps Avery Walker B, right? I could have used next costume as well, but here I want to show you a certain structure, so I'm going to use switch costume, and now I'm going to duplicate this part of the code, right? So what will happen is, right, if I did this, then if I duplicate it, now I can go from, so what did I do? I duplicated this portion of the code, basically move 20 steps, wait 0.5 seconds, and switch costume to every walker C, right? So let's analyze this code and then we will run it to see what happens, right? Uh, when flag is clicked, switch costume to every walker A, right? So it will appear like every walking A, yeah? Next, you go to this point and move 20 steps. So what does move mean? Move means change your position by 20 steps, right? So in this case, move forward by 20 steps, right? Wait for some 0.5 seconds and then switch costume to every walker B, every walking B, right? Again, move 20 steps, wait for some half a second and switch costume to every walking C. Now let's see what happens here, right? So you notice that, okay, so I did it only once because, right? So we will do it a little bit more by saying that let's duplicate this, I'll duplicate this and this time I'll go to every working, say D, right? And then I can come back, right? Now I want you to notice this carefully. I have asked every to go forward, but let's say I want it to also come back, right? So how do I make it come back? Remember, when we made the sprite go backwards, we put a negative number, right, in the x and y value. So x value negative means it starts coming backwards, right to left. So we do the same thing here. If I put move minus 20 steps, and so I did every A, B, C, D, I can make this every walking C, right? And say I say duplicate this, come back to B, come back to B, and then I can have it come back to A again, right? So duplicate. See this very slowly, very carefully. It's just, it's a simple piece of code actually. And then I can, all I need to do is to just put this, if I did this code, right? Let's say we do it once, what happens, right? So you see that Avery is walking and then it's coming back, right? So it looks like kind of Avery is dancing, right? But the dance is a bit incomplete because I do not yet have a forever loop on that, right? So forever makes it do this forever and ever again. And so if I did that, okay, so I have to be careful on where I place the forever. So I want to place the forever basically here, right? So if I did this, right, now you see what happens. So every is just, it looks like it's a very simple dance it's doing. It's just moving back and forth. But you see, our Aemon is nicely dancing. Our ballerina is doing her dance. Our princess is doing her dance. And we have just used simple combination of movement and change of costume to create dance moves, right? Now, this act of changing costumes, this act of moving, we will do again and again in everything that we do, right? So hence it's important, right? Now, let's move forward a little bit, right? So we have previously seen that we can add a new backdrop to our code, right? And how we do that is basically go and click here, right? And choose a backdrop, right? So today what we will see is how can I make this backdrop change as my code is running, right? Let's just like we're changing our costumes, can we somehow make the backdrop also change, right? So let's say, since we're talking of music and dance, I'm going to choose some backdrops from music, right? So maybe I'll choose this backdrop, right? And I can go and add more backdrops to my code. So I'll choose music, maybe I'll choose spotlight, right? And I'll also choose, let's say in music, I'll also choose theater, right? So if I select my this stage, I can see that I have got three backdrops available to me, right? I've got three backdrops here available to me. But in this backdrop, Eamon looks a bit strange. So I'll move Eamon here somewhere so that it looks like it's standing on the ground, and Princess probably I can move here. So everything is okay now, right? Uh, in these Now I've got a backdrop of concert, I've got a backdrop of spotlight, and I've got a backdrop of theater, right? Now, what I've also got this empty backdrop, I can delete it, right? So that I've got in my concert, I've got a concert backdrop, a spotlight backdrop, and a theater backdrop, right? Now we will now learn how you can change these backdrops as the code progresses, right? And in fact, the answer is kind of something that you know. The important point is where do you put this code, right? So there are two options for you. One option is you click the stage and you put the code in the script area for the stage, right? This is fine. Or you can also put it in exactly one of the sprites. Now remember, why do I say this, right? Because the backdrop is common for all the sprites, right? So if all the sprites start changing the backdrop, it can get very confusing, right? So since it's common to everybody, we can put it in any one of the sprites, right? Or if you prefer, you can also put it in the backdrop section, right? So for me, I will put this code in the backdrop section. And what is the code? Well, it's very simple. Go to looks, right? Just like you know, we had for the sprites, we had change costume, next costume. I can also do the same thing with the backdrops, right? And what I will do is when flag is clicked, right? So I go here, say when flag clicked, I say switch backdrop to theater, right? So now in this drop down, it tells me all the backdrops that are available to me, right? So I have concert, I have spotlight, I have theater, right? I can also use some other things, but let's stick to these right now. Now I say forever, for example, let's say I say control forever, right? Say I use the same kind of logic, wait 1 second, and then go here and say next backdrop. Now you could change this 1 to 2 seconds if you like. You can do, whatever. But what will this do, right? So we will always start with theater, but every 1 second you notice my backdrop is getting changed, right? Now, it, right? So you notice that everything is happening, but every 1 second the backdrop is getting changed, right? Now, in fact, the fact that the backdrop is getting changed, we can use it to control our sprites as well, right? So, for example, you can say that, look, I want Aemon to hide when a certain backdrop comes, right? So, what can I do? I can go to the Aemon code and I can choose an event called when backdrop switches to, for example, concert, right? I should say, Amen, maybe you should hide, right? So I'm just using the fact that backdrops are changing again and again. I'm telling only Amen. Remember, now these sprites are extremely obedient, right? So what I tell Amen, only Amen would do, right? So now let's see what happens in this code, right? So when I start with theater, change to concert, and Amen is hidden, right? But what happened? Amen never came back. Any idea why it did not come back? If you're thinking hard enough, it's clear because Aemon is obedient, right? You have told Aemon to hide, hence it hid. Why did it hide? Because I chose this event called when backdrop switches to concert, right? So as you know, in the backdrop code, I have put when flag click, keep on changing the backdrop, right? Every 1 second, change the backdrop. So which means at some point it becomes concert, right? We have three backdrops here: concert, spotlight, theater. So at some point the backdrop becomes concert, and once that happens, Aemon senses the backdrop is concert, nicely goes and hides, right? Now, if you wanted to come back, let's say for some other backdrop, no problem. You can go and again use an event when backdrop switches to, for example, theater, right? And then you can say looks, go back to looks and show. Now see what will happen, right? So Aemon will show, Aemon is dancing, it disappears, it comes back again. So basically, Aemon is showing up only when the backdrop is theater, right? Now, Eamon's dance looks a little too fast to me, so I can make it a little slower. Probably I'll make it, say, zero point 0.8 seconds, right? And Eamon might look somewhat better doing that dance, right? It hides now. Okay? So Eamon is dancing, right? So Eamon is dancing and it's going on and off, right? Now, all of this is very nice. All of this is quite nice, but what is dance without music, right? So I'm going to now tell you how you could add some music to this, right? And again, listen to this carefully because I see students making mistakes in this very often, right? So to add music, right? So one thing again, where do you add music, right? So you can add music in either any of these sprites, exactly one. So if you're adding in a sprite, make sure you're adding in the first sprite because that's just logical, right? So you can add it here, or you can also add it in the stage section, right? Wherever we did for the stage, right? Now, since music is common to everybody, so I recommend that you add music in stage, right? Now, how do you add music, right? So it turns out that Scratch gives you lots of options with a lot of nice sounds, right? So what you do is select the backdrop, right? Click sounds, and now again, just like we have added costumes, backdrops, and sprites, click on this button, just choose a sound, right? And you again have lots and lots of sounds. So let's say I will choose, maybe in the loop, I will choose, let's say, dance, right? It's like a dance around. It's a very long sound, right? So if I can play this, and see how it looks. So a nice dance music, right? And I go to the code section, and what I do is I create a new event block when flag clicked. All right, I go to sound and I say play sound dance around until done, and I keep doing this, because this sound is long, but some other sound might be small, so I can just wrap this in a forever, right? So if I did this, what will happen is when the flag is clicked, so now there are many when flag click loops here, that does not matter. When the flag is clicked, all of these loops will start getting activated. So for example, this particular loop will make the background switch every 1 second, as we saw. This particular thing will make music play. For the princess, it will make it change its costume again and again and create like a dancing effect. For Aemon, likewise, and Aemon also has these conditions. Maybe we can remove it. Maybe Aemon's can again change it to something like point 0.4, maybe, right? Or point 0.5, yeah. And then maybe Ballerina will also dance and Avery will also dance, right? So let's see, click the sprite and see what happens. So So you notice how starting with just looks and costumes, by combining that with motion, by switching backdrops, by changing costumes, and finally by adding music, we have created a very simple, not probably the most beautiful, but the very simple dance studio, right? And the concepts that we learned today, which is namely of changing background, adding background music, changing costumes, are actually very helpful, as we will see when we build more advanced games later on, right? With this, I'm done. Thank you very much for watching this patiently. I hope you like this. Take care. Bye bye.